Welcome, my friend. Let everything slow. Elden Ring. Nightreign is not a sequel. It is not a continuation of the Tarnished's journey through the lands between. It is something the lore describes as a branching point, a place where the same world's history took a different turn and arrived somewhere else entirely. Tonight, we begin not with the characters or the fights, but with the world itself, and with the 13 facts about it that most players pass through without stopping. Each fact has been drawn from item descriptions, journal entries, NPC dialogue, and the particular kind of detail that From Software buries in places most people never look. Let everything slow. Fact 1. Nightreign takes place on a parallel timeline, not after Elden Ring. The lands between in Nightreign is not the lands between after the events of Elden Ring. It is not a future in which the Tarnished succeeded or failed, and the world moved on from that outcome. It is a parallel version of the same world, one that branched from the moment of the shattering and went somewhere the original game never went. In the original Elden Ring, the shattering was the catastrophe that drove the story. The breaking of the Elden Ring, the descent of the demigods into war, the scattering of the great runes across the lands between. The Tarnished was called back to address the aftermath of this catastrophe. That calling, the guidance of grace leading the Tarnished home, was the first event of the original game. In Nightreign, the guidance of grace was not what arrived. Something else came instead. The night's tide rolled across the land before any Tarnished could be called back. The sequence of events that would have led to the original game story was interrupted, replaced by something that the lands between had not prepared for. Limveld is the region of the lands between that the night has claimed most thoroughly. It is the world the original game was set in, wearing a different face. This is why the geography is recognizable. The Erdtree is still there. The castles and the ruins and the deep valleys are still there. The bones of the original Elden Ring are visible through the night's alterations. But the story is different, the characters are different, and the catastrophe at the center of it arrived before anyone could do anything about it. Fact 2. Hailstor's true identity was hidden in plain sight before launch. The identity of the final Night Lord was one of the most carefully guarded pieces of information in Nightreign's pre-launch period. From Software did not reveal it. The trailers did not name him. The promotional material referred only to the night and its creatures and the Nightfarers who would oppose them. The identity was leaked early anyway. Elden Ring Nightreign's achievement list was published before the game released, and the achievements listed boss names. Among them was Hailstor. Players who were paying attention had the final boss's name weeks before they had the chance to fight him. His internal name in the game's data is different. The files refer to him as Nameless, not a placeholder, not an unfinished label, a deliberate designation for a being who had lost the name he was born with so thoroughly that the game's own architecture chose not to give him one. The player never learns what he was called before the night. The lore does not preserve it. The credits of the world he cursed do not contain his name. He is the Night Lord, and before that he was a knight, and before that he was someone. And whatever that someone was called is gone with the country he failed to protect. Fact 3. The night's tide is not only darkness, it is rain and violet fire together. The description of the night's tide in the lore is specific about what it is. It is not darkness alone. It is not the absence of light the name suggests. The night's tide is described as an encroaching wall, a moving boundary that consumes the landscape as it advances. And what it is made of is two things at once: violet flames and relentless rain. The combination is strange. Fire and rain are not natural companions. The violet fire of the night tide does not behave the way ordinary fire behaves, does not respond to water the way ordinary fire would. The rain that falls within the night's territory falls without relief, without the sense that it will stop, without the ordinary relationship between weather and time. The flames do not extinguish. The rain does not cease. They coexist in the particular way that things coexist, when neither of them belongs to the natural order. This is visible in Limveld as a constant environmental fact. The rain is always there. The violet light is always there. Players who spend hours in Limveld will find that the combination becomes a kind of atmospheric constant, the background against which everything else happens. From software built the mood of Nightreign into its weather, and the weather was built from the nature of Hailstorm's curse. Fact 4. Each expedition lasts roughly 3 days and 45 minutes. The structure of a Nightreign expedition is built around a compressed timeline. 2 days and 2 nights of survival in Limveld, followed by a third night in which the Night Lord must be faced. The whole thing runs approximately 45 to 60 minutes in real time. This compression is not only a game design choice. The law of the night implies that the Night Lord's realm operates on its own temporal logic. The 3-day cycle is the shape the night imposes on those who enter it. Enough time to prepare, not enough time to be comfortable. The third night always arriving before the Nightfarers feel ready for it. The expeditions reset between runs. Limveld is rebuilt. The enemies that were defeated are back. The items that were found are gone. The Nightfarers return to the Roundtable hold and begin again with what they started with, carrying only the knowledge the previous expedition produced. The experience accumulates. The world does not. This structure, which feels like a game mechanic from the outside, has a lore dimension when looked at from inside the fiction. The night is not a place that can be worn down by attrition. The hold sends people in, and they fight, and they return, and the night reconstitutes itself. The cycle continues until a group of Nightfarers capable of reaching the Night Lord and defeating it breaks the cycle from within. Fact 5. Limveld is only one region of the lands between, not the whole world. The geography of Nightreign is smaller than the geography of the original Elden Ring, and the lore accounts for this. Limveld is a specific region, one portion of the lands between, the portion that the Night Tide has claimed most thoroughly, and that the Roundtable hold exists within. The rest of the lands between is still there, still existing, still carrying on in whatever state the Shattering and the Night have left it in. The shifting earths, the events that transform Limveld's landscape between expeditions, are the Night's ability to reshape the physical world expressing itself in one concentrated location. The Erdtree is visible from Limveld, which means Leyndell is somewhere in the direction the Erdtree stands. The shape of the land carries the recognizable geography of the original game. The scale is different. The focus is tighter. This has a lore implication that the game does not emphasize, but the geography implies. The catastrophe in Nightreign is a regional one, at least in its immediate expression. The Night has taken Limveld. The rest of the lands between is elsewhere. Whatever is happening in the rest of the world while the Roundtable hold fights the Night is not something the game addresses, and the not addressing is itself a detail worth sitting with. Fact 6. The Roundtable hold summons Nightfarers. They did not choose to come. The Nightfarers did not decide to come to the Roundtable hold in the way that adventurers decide to travel to a place. They were called. The hold's mechanism for assembling the people it needed worked the way a summons works. It reached into the world and brought them there, and the reaching was not something they could refuse. This is visible in the backstories. The Wylder was in Knoll when the Hold called him. The Guardian was somewhere trying to manage his diminishing wing. The Iron Eye was following the Fellowship's instructions across the lands between. None of them had the Hold as their destination before the Hold made itself their destination. The Priestess, who is the Hold's most visible human presence, describes the summons as something the Hold did rather than something she arranged. She was already there when the others arrived. She received them as they came. The Iron Menial, whose presence predates the Nightfarers in the Hold's lore, had been waiting for the people the Hold would bring. The summons selected specific people, not the most powerful available warriors, not the most famous, the people who were finished with their previous lives in one way or another, who had arrived at the place where what they had been doing had run out of road. The Hold found the people it needed, which means it had a way of knowing what it needed. The lore does not explain how, it only shows the results. Fact 7. The Iron Menial knew what each Nightfarer needed before they asked. The Iron Menial is the Hold's steward, its caretaker, the figure who manages the physical and practical dimensions of the Nightfarer's existence between expeditions. He knows where things are. He knows what people need. He has information that he distributes at the moment when the person asking for it is ready to use it. His knowledge is not passive. The Wylder needed to find the study where the record of his sister's presence was kept, and the Iron Menial knew where the study was and when to mention it. The Raider needed to enter the tourney of the lands between to find his rival, and the Iron Menial knew about the tourney and guided him toward it. The Guardian needed to confront the recluse in the garden, and the Iron Menial managed the conditions under which that confrontation could happen. He is also discreet with the information he holds. He does not distribute everything he knows at once. He parcels it out in the way that someone with a complete picture of a situation gives information to people who only have partial pictures. Enough to move forward, not enough to overwhelm. The timing of what he shares is as significant as the content. The lore does not explain what the Iron Menial is, or how long he has been in the Hold, or whether he was there before the night arrived, or arrived with the first Nightfarer. He is there. He has been caring for people for longer than any of the Nightfarers have been alive, and the caring is performed with the patient attention of someone for whom this is the whole of what they do. Fact 8. The Priestess is the Duchess, and she was already there. One of the Hold's most quietly significant revelations is the identity of the Priestess, the robed figure in the silver mask who greets the Nightfarers when they arrive and provides the orientation that makes the Hold function as a place rather than just a building. She is the Duchess, the righteous thief. She arrived at the Hold before any of the other Nightfarers, which means the Hold called her first, or she found her way there before the call. When the Wylder was at last summoned, she was already waiting. The white robe and the silver mask were the presentation the Hold required rather than who she was. She had been managing her own grief and her own search for her brother through the institutional role the Hold had given her. The reveal comes through the old pocket watch. When the Wylder completes the Tricephalos expedition and brings back this item, the Priestess recognizes it, something from the clan, something from Knoll. She asks about it, and in the asking reveals herself, and in the revealing, the Duchess steps out from behind the Priestess, and the Hold becomes a slightly different place than it had been before. She had been there all along. The Hold's welcome, the orientation, the gentle management of the Nightfarers' arrivals had been her. She had not told her brother. She had been waiting for the moment when the telling would land correctly, and the old pocket watch was that moment. Fact 9. Nightfarers dissolve into strands of grace. When the night ends, the ending of a successful expedition does not leave the Nightfarers standing in a cleared field, victorious. It ends them in a specific way that the law describes as a return rather than a death. When the Night Lord falls and the night cycle breaks, the Nightfarers dissolve into strands of grace. The golden light that the Tree and the guidance of grace have always been associated with in the Lands Between's theology. They return to the Tree, not in the sense of being buried there or memorialized there, but in the sense of the golden light of what they were flowing back into the great source of that light in the Lands Between. It is the same movement that souls make when they return to the cycle. It is not described as painful or as a loss. It is the completion of what the hold assembled them for. The Duchess's arrangement with the iron menial is built around this fact. She knew she would dissolve with the others when the night ended. She asked the menial to bridge what remained of her brother to the outside world, to preserve the connection between them past the moment of her dissolution. The small object, the earring or the brooch or the clan token, would carry something of her forward into the world after the hold was gone. She was not trying to avoid the ending. She was trying to make sure the ending was not the only thing she left behind. Fact 10. Hailstorm can open rifts to other Night Lord arenas during his boss fight. The final encounter with Hailstorm is one of the more visually distinctive boss fights From Software has produced, and one of the details that players often notice without registering its implication. During the fight, Hailstorm opens rifts in the sky. The rifts are not decorative. They reveal the skyboxes of other Night Lord arenas. Each rift connects to a different Night Lord's realm, and each connection grants Hailstorm a corresponding elemental affinity during the period the rift is open. The sky above the arena shifts to show another part of the night's architecture, and the power that Night Lord embodies flows through the rift into Hailstorm's attacks. The implication is cosmological. Hailstorm is not one of the Night Lords among others. He is the Night Lord whose night contains all the others. He can reach into their arenas because their arenas are expressions of his night. The other Night Lords are aspects of the catastrophe he created. He pulls from them the way the source of a river draws from its own tributaries. This makes the final fight a summary of everything the expedition has been. The Nightfarers have already fought through the night's various expressions on their way here. Hailstorm calls those expressions into the arena with him. The last fight is, in a sense, a reminder of everything that came before it. Fact 11. The game runs in 3-player co-op, but can be played alone or in pairs. The design of Nightreign is built around 3 players. The encounters are tuned for 3 Nightfarers working together. The Roundtable Hold's Roundtable has seats for the full complement of people the Hold assembles. The law's image of the Hold is of a group rather than an individual, but the game accommodates fewer. A single Nightfarer can enter an expedition alone. 2 can enter together. The experience is harder when the numbers are lower, which is the expected consequence of the design. What is less expected is the lore dimension this creates. A solo Nightfarer in Limveld is one of the Hold summons who did not wait for the others, or whose companions did not arrive, or who chose to go in alone for reasons that the player supplies. The game does not provide a narrative for the solo run, but the world still exists, the night still falls, and the Night Lord is still at the end of the 3rd night. Whatever story the solo player brings with them is the story of that expedition. The lore implies that this has happened before. Not every summons produces a full complement. The hold sends what it has. Sometimes what it has is one person, and the willingness to try anyway. Fact 12. The knight's enemies are drawn from other worlds and other times. Haelster's power includes the ability to summon monsters and champions from other worlds. The enemies that populate Limvel during a night expedition are not all native to the lands between. They have been drawn through the same kind of dimensional fracture that Haelster's rift opening demonstrates at the boss level. This is why the bestiary of Nightreign is strange in the way it is strange. Some enemies are native. Some come from elsewhere, from times and places the lands between's ordinary history does not contain. The night is not just a catastrophe affecting one world. It is a catastrophe with access to other worlds, drawing from them what it needs to populate itself. The garbs that players can unlock, the cosmetic skins that reference other From Software games, are the surface expression of this same principle. Nightreign's world contains echoes of Demon Souls, Dark Souls, Bloodborne, and Sekiro, not only in the enemy roster, but in the visual language of certain locations. The night has pulled from everywhere. The hold was assembled to fight everything the night brought. Fact 13. The Cord End is the rarest drop in Nightreign, with an estimated drop rate below 1%. Every From Software game has its extraordinarily rare items, and Nightreign is no exception. The Cord End is the item the community identified early as the most elusive drop in the game, with an estimated drop rate below 1%. The item itself, when obtained, grants access to 3 sacrificial twigs, which is a modest reward for the investment the drop rate implies. The community response to the Cord End was not proportionate to its utility. Players spent hours hunting it, tracking kill counts, sharing drop locations, comparing strategies for improving the odds. The discussion of the item across Nightreign's community forums and subreddits was extensive in the particular way that From Software's rare items tend to generate discussion. Not because the item was powerful, but because the hunting of it was the thing. This is a fact about the game's design that also functions as a fact about the people who play it. A sub 1% drop rate on a modest reward should not produce extensive community engagement. It does in every From Software game, because the hunt itself is the value. The Cord End was not a powerful item. It was the occasion for the community to do what it does with these games. Collaborate, persist, and find meaning in the process of finding something that does not want to be found. Sleep well. Tomorrow we go deeper into the night itself, and into the 13 facts about Haelster and the darkness he brought with him that most players never stop to read. The Night Lords are the architecture of the catastrophe. Haelster created the night, but the night is not only Haelster. It is 8 things, 8 shapes, 8 encounters at the end of 8 expeditions, and each of them has a name and a nature, and a set of details that the game does not always make time to explain. Tonight we slow down with 13 facts about the Night Lords, who they are, what their names mean, and what the lore preserves about them, that a player moving quickly through Limvel might never stop to read. Fact 14. Every Night Lord has 2 names, a lore name and a creature name. Each of the 7 non-Haelster Night Lords has 2 designations in the game's architecture. One is the lore name, the name the game uses in narrative context. Gladius, Beast of Night. Adel, Baron of Night. Noster, Wisdom of Night. These names follow a pattern. A given name followed by a title that describes their relationship to the night itself. The second name is the creature name. the designation used in gameplay context and in much of the community discussion. Tricephalos, Gaping Jaw, Sentient Pest, Augur, Equilibrious Beast, Darkdrift Knight, Fissure in the Fog. These names describe what the Night Lord looks like, or how it behaves rather than what it is in the Knight's hierarchy. The two-name system is characteristic of From Software's approach to naming across its catalogue. It maintains a distinction between the entity's identity and its appearance. Gladius is a name that implies a person, or something that was once a person. Tricephalos is a description of a body. The game uses both because the truth of each Night Lord requires both registers, what they are in the Night structure, and what they are to look at. Hailstor is the exception. He has one lore name and two creature names, the Shape of Night and the Night Aspect, corresponding to his two phases. The phase names do not describe a person. They describe a state. His original name, as noted in the previous part, is preserved nowhere. Fact 15. Gladius must be defeated first. He is the gate through which all other Night Lords are reached. The progression structure of Nightreign is unusual compared to most games in the From Software catalogue. Players do not unlock expeditions by defeating the previous one in sequence. The map of available expeditions opens up, and players can choose which Night Lord to pursue once the gate has been opened. The gate is Gladius. The Tricephalos expedition is the only one available at the start of the game. Every other expedition, every other Night Lord, is locked behind the first defeat of Gladius, Beast of Night. Once he falls, 6 more expeditions unlock at once, and the player can approach them in any order. Hailstor requires more. 4 different Night Lords must be defeated across 4 different expeditions before the final encounter becomes available. The game withholds the last fight until the Nightfarers have demonstrated that they understand the Knight's range, that they have faced it in its various expressions and survived. You cannot arrive at Hailstor without having first proven yourself against multiple shapes of what he created. This is not arbitrary gating. The lore logic of it is that Hailstor draws from all the other Night Lords during his fight. The rifts he opens in the sky pull from their arenas. To face him without having faced them would be to walk into a fight drawing on sources you have never encountered. Fact 16. Fulgor lost his left arm to betrayal, and it shows in his second phase. Fulgor, champion of Nightglow, is described in the lore as an ancient, battle-consumed centaur. He carries a great spear capable of channeling the storm. He is also missing his left arm. The lore specifies the reason. The arm was severed by his former companions, who betrayed him. The game does not elaborate on who those companions were or what the circumstances of the betrayal were, but the wound is there in the model, visible and permanent, the physical record of something that happened before Fulgor became a Night Lord. In his second phase, the stump becomes active in the fight's visual language. A dark purple liquid begins spurting from the wound, the color of the Knight's power expressed through the place where the arm was. The stump bleeds night. The betrayal that removed the arm has been absorbed into what Fulgor is now. The wound transfigured into part of his nature as a creature of Hailstor's darkness. There is an additional connection that the Ionized questline makes explicit. The Edge of Order, the weapon required to execute the traitor in the Hole's crypt, comes from Fulgor. The Nightfarer, who is hunting a traitor among the Fellowship, must defeat the Night Lord, who was himself betrayed in order to obtain the instrument of justice. The lore draws the line quietly and leaves the player to notice it. Fact 17. Maris can put the entire map to sleep, and a single lightning strike cancels it. Maris, Fathom of Night, is described by the community as one of the easier Night Lords once the trick is learned, and one of the most punishing before the trick is known. The reason is a single ability, a global sleep incantation that Maris channels from its floating position above the arena, which, if completed, puts every Nightfarer in the fight to sleep at the same time. The counter is specific and elegant. A single hit of lightning damage during the casting animation breaks Maris's stance and cancels the attack outright. Not a great deal of damage, not a particular weapon, just lightning applied once before the cast completes. The game provides this counter through the same mechanic it uses for stance breaking, but the particular application here means that every team fighting Maris needs one person capable of delivering lightning damage on demand. The design is a compressed lesson in attention. Maris is signaling the cast in advance. The solution is visible. The failure mode is not recognizing the signal until after the map has gone dark and everyone is sleeping. The lore dimension is the nature of the Night Lord itself. Maris, Fathom of Night, whose title implies depth rather than aggression, produces its most dangerous effect through a lullaby, through the night's power expressed as an invitation to stop fighting and rest. Fact 18. Noster consists of two separate creatures that combine mid-fight. Noster, Wisdom of Night, is the Night Lord designated as the sentient pest in creature terms, and the name implies something singular. The fight reveals something more complicated. Noster at the start of the encounter consists of two distinct entities. A moth in the style of the moonlight butterfly from Dark Souls, and a large armored poison insect that functions as its ground-based companion. They begin the fight in this separated state, which requires the Nightfarers to manage two targets with different threat profiles. The moth operates at range, firing magical projectiles. The insect operates at close range, moving slowly enough that keeping distance is viable if the moth's range fire is being managed. The fight changes at the midpoint. The two creatures combine. The moth descends to the insect and takes a position on its head, and the resulting fused form is the true expression of what Noster is, the wisdom of the night expressed through the union of its two components. The combat dynamic shifts with the combination. The separated tactics no longer apply. The combined form requires a unified response to a unified threat. The name Noster contains the Greek root for knowledge, gnosis. The Night Lord, whose title is Wisdom of Night, is two things that become one thing. The knowledge, the lore implies, is not in either component alone. It is in the synthesis. Fact 19. Libra combines holy and madness damage, making it one of the hardest Night Lords to counter. Libra, creature of night, has the designation Equilibrious Beast, and the name contains the lore key to what makes it difficult. Equilibrium, balance. The Night Lord of Balance combines two damage types that are, in the lands between theological architecture, among the most distinct in their nature and their source. Holy damage belongs to the Erd Tree, to Marika's order, to the golden light that organizes the lands between spiritual hierarchy. Madness belongs to the outer gods, to the forces outside that order, to the scarlet rot and the frenzied flame that represent the alternative to the Erd Tree's dominion. These two forces are not supposed to coexist in a single entity. They stand at opposite poles of the lands between's religious geography. Libra combines them in a continuous barrage of AOE incantations that cover the arena from multiple directions. The difficulty is partly the density of the attacks and partly the weapon economy of Nightreign. Reliable sources of frenzy damage, which is Libra's scripted weakness, are not common finds during an expedition. A Nightfarer team facing Libra without frenzy-capable weapons must manage the fight on less favorable terms. The design implication of a Night Lord who merges holy and madness is a comment on the Knight's relationship to the lands between's existing theology. The Knight does not respect the distinction between the Erdtree's order and its opposition. It draws from both. Libra is the Night Lord who makes that indifference to theological boundaries most explicit. Fact 20. Each Night Lord is reached through a petrified tree on the final day. The portal that takes Nightfarers to their Night Lord encounter is not a conventional gate or a dungeon entrance. It is a petrified tree positioned in a purple area of the spirit shelter, accessible at noontide on the final day of the expedition. The imagery is deliberate. Trees in the lands between carry theological weight. The Erdtree is the central fact of the lands between spiritual geography. The petrified tree is its antithesis. Dead wood, static rather than living, existing in the purple of the night rather than the gold of the Erdtree's influence. The passage from Limveld to the Night Lord's arena goes through death. The spirit shelter itself is the building where the Day 3 transition happens, the location that the expedition converges on when the third night approaches. Finding it, reaching it in time, and surviving until noontide is part of the expedition's rhythm. The Night Lord does not come to the Nightfarers. The Nightfarers go to the Night Lord through the dead tree at the moment the day sits at its center. Noontide is specifically when the passage opens, not dawn, not dusk, but the midpoint of the day, the moment of maximum light before the final dark begins. The law places the entry to the night's deepest territory at the moment furthest from the night. Fact 21. Some Night Lords can invade other expeditions as special events. 3 of the 7 non-Hailstor Night Lords have confirmed invasion events: Noster, Maris, and Libra. During expeditions not designated for these Night Lords, they can appear as special events, arriving in Limveld, outside their normal context. The invasion events are not harder versions alone of the regular encounter. They carry their own structure and their own rewards. Completing an invasion event grants the Nightfarers unique passive abilities, benefits that persist through the expedition, and that cannot be obtained through the ordinary course of the fight. The lore dimension of the invasions is that the night is not contained in discrete expeditions. The Night Lords exist in Limveld, regardless of which expedition is being undertaken. Noster, Maris, and Libra are present in the Night's territory, even when the Nightfarers have chosen a different target. Their appearances in non-designated expeditions are the Night asserting its presence outside the framework the Roundtable Hold uses to organize its campaigns against it. The Hold chooses which Night Lord to fight. The Night does not always cooperate with the choice. Fact 22. The rune formation in the Day 3 Sky May reference the Night of Black Knives. One of the most discussed visual details in Nightreign's community is what appears in the sky during the transition to Day 3. A rune forms above Limveld as the third night approaches. Community analysts have noted that this rune bears a strong resemblance to the marking carved into Godwyn the Golden's body and Ranni's body during the Night of Black Knives, the event in the original Elden Ring's lore that began the sequence leading to the Shattering. The Night of Black Knives was the assassination of Godwyn by knives imbued with the power of the Rune of Death, carried out by the Black Knife assassins on Ranni's behalf. It was the inciting event of the original game's backstory. Godwyn's body was left deathless in the Deeproot depths, his death incomplete, his soul taken, but his body persisting in a state that produced the cursed forms visible throughout the lands between. If the Day 3 rune is referencing this marking, The implication is a connection between the Knight's arrival in Nightreign's timeline and the Knight of Black Knives in the original game's timeline. The parallel timeline that Nightreign inhabits branched from the Shattering, and the Shattering was preceded by the Knight of Black Knives. The sky above Limveld may be writing this history in the language of the rune that began it. The connection has not been confirmed by From Software. The resemblance is visible, and the community's analysis is detailed. The lore, as is characteristic of this developer, does not close the interpretation. Fact 23. Many non-Night Lord bosses in Limveld arrive from other From Software games. The minor bosses and field bosses that populate Limveld during expeditions are not all native to the Elden Ring universe. Some are returning bosses from Dark Souls, Dark Souls 2, Dark Souls 3, and the original Elden Ring itself. The Knight's ability to draw enemies from other worlds, established as a lore principle in Part 1, is expressed most densely in the field boss roster. Duke's Dear Fraser from Dark Souls 2 appears. Draconic Tree Sentinel and Royal Knight Loretta from the original Elden Ring appear. Morgott the Omen King returns with an updated moveset. Godric the Grafted appears. The Bestiary of Nightreign is a collection drawn from across the series, brought together by the Knight's dimensional reach. The inclusion of Dark Souls enemies in the Elden Ring universe is not explained within Nightreign's fiction in a way that resolves the question of continuity. These are different worlds in the From Software universe, not different eras of the same world. The Knight reaching across to pull from them implies a reach beyond the timeline Nightreign inhabits, a capacity to draw from the entire history of what From Software has built, rather than from one game's world alone. The Nightfarers fight alongside and against the history of the series. The enemies they encounter were once the obstacles of games played years before Nightreign existed. The Knight has gathered them all into Limveld, and the Hold has assembled people to fight them. Fact 24. Some Night Lord bosses use moves that were cut from the original games. Within the returning boss roster, several Night Lord and Field Boss encounters use movesets that include actions which were developed during the original game's production, but cut before release. The Knight has not only imported these bosses from their source games, in some cases it has given them back what they lost in development. This is a detail that From Software has not confirmed in promotional material. It has been identified by community analysts who have cross-referenced Nightreign's boss move sets against data-mined content from the original games, finding actions that appear in the data but were never implemented in the released versions. The Knight's versions of these bosses perform them. The lore implication, approached from inside the fiction, is that the versions of these bosses that appear in Limveld are not the versions that appeared in the original games. They are something the Knight has produced, related to the originals but not identical, capable of things the originals were not. The Knight does not copy what it draws from. It produces its own version of it. Fact 25. Caligo is the least discussed Night Lord among the community. Caligo, Miasma of Night, designated Fisher in the Fog, occupies an unusual position in the community's relationship with Nightreign's Night Lords. The other 6 receive extensive discussion of their lore, their mechanics, their design, their difficulty. Caligo receives less. The reasons are partly structural. Caligo is weak to fire, which is one of the more reliably available damage types in Nightreign. The fight, while not easy, is considered more approachable than Libra or Fulgor. A Night Lord that does not resist the available tools is a Night Lord that the community clears more quickly and thinks about less. The name is worth sitting with regardless. Caligo is Latin for mist, fog, darkness, the obscuring of light by something that is not solid enough to be a wall. The miasma of night. A Night Lord whose nature is not the direct expression of darkness, but its atmosphere, the way darkness seeps into a space before the full dark arrives. The fissure in the fog is a crack in the obscuring, a gap through which something worse might pass. The least discussed of the Night Lords is the one whose name is about the difficulty of seeing clearly. It is possible that the community's limited engagement with Caligo is the response the design intended. Fact 26. Adel, Baron of Night, is the only Night Lord whose weakness is its own domain. Adel, Baron of Night, designated the Gaping Jaw, is weak to poison damage. This is unusual in the Night Lord roster, because poison is not a damage type associated with the Golden Order, the lightning of storms, or the holy fire that opposes the night's darkness. It is a natural process. Decay. The gradual erosion that living things undergo in the presence of the toxic. The other Night Lord weaknesses follow a theological logic. Holy opposes the night's darkness. Lightning breaks the focus of a being channeling the night's power. Fire burns what the night produces. Frenzy counters the balance Libra maintains. These are oppositions of principle, the law's way of saying that each Night Lord can be addressed by the force that stands against what it represents. Adele is weak to the thing that rots. Not the Erd Tree's light, not the storm's strike, not the sacred flame. The process that breaks down any organic matter given enough time. A Baron of Night, a title implying status within the Night's hierarchy, can be undone by what undoes everything in time. The law does not explain why. It preserves the detail and leaves it to accumulate meaning through repetition. The Baron of Night, whose domain is consumption and darkness, is vulnerable to the patient, unglamorous work of decay, not an opposing force, just time, and what time does to things. Sleep well. Tomorrow we enter the Roundtable hold itself, and the 13 facts about its inhabitants and its architecture that most players spend between expeditions without stopping to read. Between expeditions, the Nightfarers return to the Roundtable hold. Most players spend this time managing their loadout, purchasing items, and preparing for the next run. The hold itself, the building they keep returning to, repays closer attention than the preparation typically allows. Tonight we slow down inside it. 13 facts about the hold's architecture, its inhabitants, and the details of its design that the pace of play tends to move past. Fact 27. The Night Lords are not fought in Limveld. They are fought outside another version of the hold. This is one of the most quietly significant structural details in Nightreign's design, and one that the player experiences without necessarily registering its implication. When the Nightfarers enter the portal through the petrified tree on the final day and face the Night Lord, they are not in Limveld. They are outside another version of the Roundtable hold. The arena for the Night Lord encounter is positioned relative to the hold rather than to the world the expedition was traversing. The Night Lords are fought on the hold's threshold, in the space that belongs to neither Limveld nor the hold's interior. The law implication is territorial. The hold is the thing the night is trying to consume. The hold is what the Nightfarers are defending by being there. The final fight does not happen somewhere in the night's claimed territory. It happens at the boundary between what the night has taken and what it has not yet taken. The Nightfarers step outside their refuge to fight what is pressing against it, and the arena they fight in is defined by the hold's presence rather than the night's. The hold is not neutral ground, it is the last ground. Fact 28. Nightfarers lose their memories upon arriving at the hold and recover them. Piece by piece. The lore of the Nightfarer's memory is one of the more quietly strange details of how the hold functions. They arrive with some sense of who they are, enough to know their names and their most immediate history. But the full picture of their pasts, the events and relationships and losses that shaped them, is not present on arrival. It returns through the expeditions. The remembrance system is the mechanism of this recovery. As Nightfarers go out into Limveld and survive and return, fragments of their histories become available. The journal in the Hold's library holds these fragments. Some are journal entries. Some are playable memories, sequences in which the player inhabits the Nightfarer's past and participates in the moment being remembered. The recovery comes out of sequence. The pleasant memories come first, or the most immediate ones, and the more difficult ones arrive later as the forays compound. The Revenant recovered her childhood memories before she recovered the truth of what she was. The Guardian recovered his regiment before he recovered the knowledge of who built the weapon that destroyed it. The Hold strips memory on arrival and returns it through the work. What the Nightfarers are fighting for is not only Limveld's survival, it is the return of their own pasts, piece by piece, through the expeditions that the Hold requires of them. Fact 29. The Iron Menial arrived at the Hold for reasons the lore does not explain. Of all the Hold's inhabitants, the Iron Menial is the one whose presence is least accounted for. The priestess is the Duchess, who arrived before the others, and whose backstory is part of the game's main narrative. The Small Jar Bazaar is a merchant who operates where trade is possible. The Nightfarers were summoned. The Iron Menial arrived for reasons unknown. The lore states this without apology. He is the Hold's housekeeper, its steward, the figure who cares for the physical space and for the people within it. He has been there. He serves. He knows what each Nightfarer needs and provides it at the moment when it can be used. Where he came from and how long he has been there, and whether he predates the night or arrived with the first summons, are questions the game does not answer. He moves through the Hold rather than staying in one place. The waiting room near the fireplace, the sparring grounds, the eastern hallway. A housekeeper tends the whole house, not one corner of it. Players looking for him will find him where the Hold currently needs attending. His stated philosophy of service is brief and characteristic of him. He has little to offer, but if anything strikes the visitor's fancy, they should consider it theirs. The generosity is real, and the modesty about the generosity is real. He is the Alfred of the Nightfarers, as the community called him early in the game's life, invoking the name of Dark Soul's most faithful servant. The comparison holds. Fact 30. When the Iron Menial helped the Revenant after her awakening, he pointed to a flower rather than speaking. The Revenant's awakening in the Hold is one of the lore's most compressed and carefully handled moments. She woke in the Hold with the memories of Daphne, the girl she believed she was. She could feel that her body had been lost and recovered, in the particular uncanny way that an object coming to life for the first time might feel its own existence as strange. She asked the Iron Menial, who had come to her aid, what had happened. He did not speak. He indicated the flower sitting at her bedside. Its white petals swayed gently, exuding what she described as a uniquely refined aroma. The flower was the answer, or the beginning of the answer, or the indication of who had placed it there and what that person's presence meant. The Iron Menial communicates this way with the Nightfarers when words are not the right tool. He points. He places things. He attends in ways that do not require explanation. His care for each Nightfarer is expressed through specific acts rather than through statements about his care. The flower was not a decoration, it was a direction. Fact 31. The Wylder is not native to the lands between. An earring brought him there. The Wylder's origin is outside the lands between. He came from elsewhere, was not born in Limveld or in any territory adjacent to it, did not grow up with the Erd tree visible on the horizon, or the particular gravity of the lands between's theological landscape shaping his understanding of the world. An earring brought him, an object from his clan, the Windwale Knoll clan, which he carried with him, and which resonated with something in the Hold's summons in a way that drew him toward the lands between, and ultimately to the Hold itself. The earring is a clan token, an object through which the connection between clan members was maintained when distance separated them. His sister, the Duchess, had an equivalent. The small objects that symbolized the promise to fight side by side wherever they were separated by land or sea. He arrived at the Hold carrying the promise without knowing, at first, who he had made it to, or that the woman in the white robe waiting at the central table was the person the earring connected him to. The Hold called him through the earring. The earring called him to his sister. The summons and the reunion were the same event. Fact 32. The Hold's currency, Merc, can only be earned by completing expeditions. The small jar bazaar's stock, which includes relics, gestures, vessels, and the random stat scenic flatstones, is priced in Merc rather than in runes, or any other currency the lands between ordinarily uses. Merc is obtained at the end of expedition runs, with the amount awarded varying based on how successful the expedition was. The more the Nightfarers accomplished during the run, whether in defeating Night Lords, completing events, or surviving further into the Night's territory, the more Merc the completed run produces. A failed expedition that ended early produces less. The economy of the Hold is tied to the quality of the fighting. This is not unusual as a game design structure. What is worth noting is the name. Merc, the currency of a place dedicated to fighting the night and restoring the order of things, is called after darkness, after the obscuring quality of poor light, after the particular kind of unclear that is not full darkness, but not clear seeing. The Nightfarers earn their right to the Hold's resources by going into the Merc and returning from it, and what they bring back is called what they brought it back from. Fact 33. The sparring grounds allow Nightfarers to practice without expedition risk. The Roundtable Hold contains a training area, the sparring grounds, where Nightfarers can practice their fighting without entering Limveld. The sparring grounds allow players to experiment with loadouts, test weapon behavior, and learn the movement of their chosen character before committing to a full expedition. The equipment taken into the sparring grounds is returned automatically when the session ends. Nothing is consumed. Nothing is lost. It is a space where the rules of Limveld's scarcity do not apply, where the cost of a mistake is only time and not resources or progress. The lore dimension of the sparring grounds is that the Hold maintains a space for preparation. It does not only send people out into the night, it provides a place to ready themselves. The Iron Menial has noted that even the hallowed sparring grounds require a little sprucing up from time to time, which is his characteristic way of explaining why he can be found there. He tends to the place where the Nightfarers prepare. The preparation matters to him. Fact 34. Revenant is hidden behind a door in the Hold that requires a purchased relic to open. The unlock sequence for the Revenant is one of the more involved in the game, and takes place substantially within the Hold's architecture, rather than in Limveld. After the Duchess is revealed through the old pocket watch, and after the besmirched frame relic is purchased from the Small Jar Bazaar, a door near the banished knight statue in the Hold's main area becomes accessible. Behind the door is the spirit of the Revenant. She is there in the Hold before she is playable. She has been there in this space behind the door, while the other Nightfarers were going out on their expeditions. The Hold contained her before it made her available. The fight that unlocks her is not against an enemy from outside. It is against her own spirit and her summons, against the version of herself that exists in the Hold's architecture before the player has chosen to engage with it. She must be defeated in her own space before she can join the party at the table. The lore resonance is in the sequence. The Revenant is a being who was locked away before she was freed, who existed in a state of potential before she was released into action. The unlock mechanic mirrors the story. She is behind a door, and accessing her requires the right object and the willingness to go through what she guards. Fact 35. The Hold has a crypt beneath it, and the crypt contains more than the traitor. The crypt under the Roundtable. Hold is the location of the Iron Eye's most significant questline moment. The traitor, reduced below the threshold of action, but not below the threshold of speech, sitting in the space where the Hold keeps what it has not resolved. The crypt's presence beneath the Hold implies an architecture of the unfinished. Above, in the Hold's main spaces, the Nightfarers prepare and train and interact. The table is set for the work. Below, in the crypt, what has not been completed yet waits. The traitor waited there after the Iron Eye's first defeat of him in Limveld, preserved by the Hold's mechanisms in the particular state that the edge of order had not yet been applied to. The crypt is also where the priestess kept watch, which is to say where the Duchess kept watch, before the full revelation of her identity. One of the things the priestess was managing, among the other functions of the Hold, was whatever was in the crypt. The management of the unresolved is part of the Hold stewardship. The lore does not specify everything the crypt contains. The traitor is the occupant the questline reveals. Whether other things await in the crypt's unrevealed spaces is a question the game leaves open, as it leaves many of its architectural implications open. Fact 36. The garden is where the most difficult conversations in the Hold take place. The Hold's garden is a specific zone within the Hold's architecture, an outdoor or semi-outdoor space that functions as the setting for several of the Nightfarers' most significant remembrance moments. The Guardian confronts the recluse there. The resolution of the questline that determines whether the witch's brooch is whole or cracked takes place there. Gardens in the lands between carry a particular atmospheric weight. They are spaces where things grow without the control that interior spaces impose. They are exposed to the sky and to whatever the sky contains. In Nightreign, the sky contains the night, at least in the Hold's vicinity, and the garden is the space in the Hold most exposed to it. The difficult conversations happen in the garden, because the garden is the space that is least protected by walls. The inside of the Hold is controlled, managed, the Iron Menial's territory. The garden is where the Hold's control softens, where what has been contained inside can be addressed in the open, where the recluse can stand with her hands open and the Guardian can decide what to do with what he knows. The garden is the part of the Hold that faces outward. Fact 37. The Nightfarers can see each other in the Hold between sessions. The Roundtable Hold in Nightreign functions as a social space as well as a practical hub. Players inhabiting different Nightfarers in the Hold can see each other moving through the same space, interacting with the same services, existing in the same building during the interval between expeditions. This is the same social architecture the original Elden Ring's Roundtable hold used. The sense that the space between the fights is shared rather than individual. In Nightreign, where the 8 Nightfarers are distinct characters with distinct histories and distinct reasons for being in the hold, the presence of multiple players moving through the same space adds a dimension to the lore that the game does not narrate aloud. The Nightfarers in the lore boast with each other, share histories, eat and drink at the table together. The social life of the hold is part of what makes it a home rather than only a base. Seeing another player's Nightfarer in the space is the mechanical expression of this. The hold is occupied, and the occupation is collective. Fact 38. The remembrances are playable memories with a distinct visual border. The remembrance system, which delivers the Nightfarers' backstories through journal entries and interactive sequences, marks the playable memories visually with a hazy, dreamlike border around the screen. The border signals a shift in register, from the hold's present to the Nightfarers' past, from the space of preparation to the space of what was. The playable sequences within remembrances place the player in the location of the memory. The executor's remembrance takes place in the painter's shed. The Iron Eyes takes place in the crypt and in Limveld. The visual border around the screen maintains the distinction between the memory and the present, ensuring that the player never loses track of which register they are in. The mechanic is characteristic of how From Software handles backstory across its catalogue, through participation rather than narration, through being in the memory rather than being told about it. The Nightfarers' histories are not cut scenes. They are sequences the player inhabits, with the visual border as the only reminder that what they are doing is a remembering. Fact 39. The Night Lord boss, Arena, is outside a version of the hold that is already crumbling. When the portal through the petrified tree brings the Nightfarers to the Night Lord's arena, the version of the Roundtable hold visible in the arena's environment is not the functioning hold they have been living in. It is a version of the hold in a state of advanced deterioration, the architecture visible, the building recognizable, but the surfaces showing the degree of decay that the night's sustained presence produces. The crumbling hold visible in the boss arena is what the hold will become if the Night Lord is not defeated. It is the hold's future conditional on failure, rendered visible in the present tense of the fight. The Nightfarers fight in front of the thing they are trying to prevent. The intact hold they return to after victory is the hold that was preserved by the outcome of the fight. The crumbling version remains where it is, unreachable, a fixed fact of what the arena was built from. 2 versions of the same building. One outside the fight, preserved and functioning. One inside it, already showing what the night does to things it claims. The final fight is held in the shadow of the possible ending. The Nightfarers can see it while they fight. Sleep well. Tomorrow we follow the individual Nightfarers more closely, beginning with the brother and the sister and the earring that connected them across the night. The story of the Wylder and the Duchess is the closest Nightreign has to a central human narrative. It is the arc that the game's front-facing marketing built around. It is the one that the other Nightfarers exist in proximity to, even when their own stories are running on different tracks. And it is the one with the most details buried in journals, item descriptions, and the quiet corners of the hold's architecture that most players walk past on their way to the next expedition. 13 facts. The brother and the sister. The Knoll between them. Fact 40. The Wylder has the same dream. every time, without variation. The Wylder's journal opens with a description of his recurring dream. It is not described as a recurring dream in general terms. The lore specifies the same dream time and time again. A long night persisting. His clansfolk driven to madness. The battle that follows. And then, when the battle ends, the sea of gravestones, that is all that remains of Windwale Knoll. The names in the dream are specific. Cousin Farhad, Little Sherin, his father, the clan's chieftain. 3 people who died in the same catastrophe, 3 nodes of loss that the dream revisits without mercy and without alteration. The Wylder wakes from this dream, and it has not changed. He falls back to sleep, and it has not changed. The night that destroyed his clan is preserved in the dream's perfect, unmodifiable fidelity. Dreams in the lands between are not always ordinary dreams. They carry weight. The dream the Wylder has is built from what happened on Windwale Knoll, and it does not do the merciful thing that ordinary dreams sometimes do, which is to soften or distort the events that are too sharp to hold in waking memory. The dream holds the events at full sharpness, repeating them, giving the Wylder no distance from what he survived. The dream ends the same way each time, with the same sentence. Only he remains, and the next sentence, the one that follows the recognition, and now only he can avenge his clan. Fact 41. The Wylder has no face beneath his helmet. He is the only Nightfarer whose unarmored self is never shown. Among the 10 Nightfarers, every character has a visible face, a rendered body beneath their armor, an unarmored self that the game's character design has built with the same care as the armored version. The Wylder does not. His helmet has no face beneath it. There is no crafted appearance there. The game has not given him one. This is not an oversight. It is specific and consistent across all the Wylder's cosmetic skins and variations. No version of his appearance shows what is underneath the winged helmet. The community noticed this early and discussed it extensively. One interpretation: the Wylder is the everyman, the stand-in, the Nightfarer, whose identity is most available to the player's projection because his face has been withheld. He is the one whose appearance is a blank in the precise place where individual identity is usually readable. The helmet is his face because no other face has been assigned. Another interpretation: the loss of his clan is so total that the Wylder has lost a dimension of himself. The face that would have been visible in the context of Windwale Knoll, in the family he grew up in the company of his sister, is the face that the night took from him. The game offers both interpretations and resolves neither. Fact 42. The Wylder's clothing is covered in Norse-inspired symbols, including a Viking boat and a red wolf. The Wylder's outfit beneath the winged helmet carries its own lore in the form of painted or embroidered imagery. The details are small enough that a player moving at expedition pace might never look closely enough to read them. Looked at closely, the clothing tells a story about the Windwale Knoll clan's visual culture. Around the neck, a red wolf on a blue forest. Around the thighs, a Viking-style longboat. Runes spread throughout the fabric in the particular way that Norse-inspired textile traditions place their symbols, not as decoration alone, but as meaning distributed across a garment. The clan came from somewhere with a specific visual language, and the Wylder carries that language on his body. The wolf, the boat, the runes, a nomadic coastal warrior culture implied by the imagery, that knew the sea and the forest and the particular kind of writing that is also marking and also protection. The clothing is the clan story written on the person who survived it. He cannot remember his sister's face. He can still read the symbols she grew up seeing on him. Fact 43. The Wylder's winged helmet shares visual DNA with Millennia, Mercury, and Valkyrie iconography. The Wylder's helmet is among the most visually distinctive in the Nightreign roster, and its ancestry is legible to anyone familiar with the sources it draws from. The wings on the sides of the helmet connect to multiple traditions at once. Millennia, Blade of Miquella, in the original Elden Ring, has a winged helmet that is among the most recognizable designs in the game's visual library. The Wylder's wings are not identical to Millennia's, but occupy similar symbolic territory. The winged helmet as an indicator of a particular kind of warrior, one associated with the forces that move between the mortal and something beyond it. Mercury, the Roman messenger god, wore winged sandals and, in some depictions, a winged helm. The wings as an indicator of speed, of travel, of the capacity to move between worlds. The Wylder travels to the lands between from elsewhere. His helmet marks him as a traveller. Valkyries, in Norse tradition, wear winged helmets in the imagery that has come to represent them most persistently. They are the figures who decide the outcome of battles and escort the dead. The Wylder has lost his clan. He is fighting to prevent the night from taking everything else. The helmet carries all of this at once. From Software's visual language works this way. One design element, multiple resonances, no single reading required. Fact 44. In the Wylder's journal, his sister's name is replaced by empty brackets. The lore entry that describes the Wylder's dream of his sister does not give her a name. Where her name would appear, the text places empty brackets. Not a redaction, not a blank space, but the specific notation of something that was once present and is now absent. The brackets represent what the hold's effect on memory has taken from him. He remembers the dream. He remembers the two horses galloping across the knoll. He looks at his sister in the dream, and her hair is dancing in the wind, and he can see the earring on her left ear. But he cannot recall her face, and where her name would be in the journal's telling of the memory, there is only the notation of the gap. This is one of the more quietly devastating details in Nightreign's lore. The sister who is alive and waiting for him in the hold is a person whose name he cannot remember. He can remember that she exists. He can remember the shape of what she was to him, the earring on her ear, the signature smile, the promise they made. Once we're done, we'll meet again. He cannot remember her name. The Iron Menial tells him in time that the Wylder and the Duchess share a striking likeness. The observation is the bridge between the earring he carries and the woman in the white robe. The name, the face, the word that was some phrase he was certain he was supposed to remember, those return through the reunion rather than through memory. Fact 45. Their final parting, before the night included a promise that reads differently now. The last time the Wylder and his sister were together before the night fell on Windwale Knoll, she said something to him. The lore preserves it. She flicked her earring with her finger, flashed her signature smile and said, "Goodbye for now, dear brother. Once we're done, we'll meet again." The promise was made in the ordinary register of a parting between people who expected to see each other again. A conditional farewell, the kind that siblings make when one of them is setting out on a journey and the expectation is that the journey will end once we're done. The done referred to whatever separate tasks had separated them. The meeting again was assumed. The night intervened. The knoll fell. The Wylder survived alone, and the promise became something he carried not as a memory of an ordinary parting, but as the last thing she said to him before everything changed. When he finds her in the hold, the promise has already been half kept. She is there. They have met again. But the second half of the condition, once we're done, turns out to have a cost she did not mention when she made it. The hold's dissolution will take her. The done she meant, the end of the night, is also the end of what the hold assembled, including her. Once we're done, we'll meet again. The meeting was real. The we're done means something she did not say in the parting. Fact 46. The old pocket watch can be obtained, even if the first expedition fails. The old pocket watch, the item that triggers the priestess's revelation of her identity as the Duchess, is primarily obtained by defeating Gladius in the Tricephalos expedition. This is the intended path. Complete the first run, defeat the first Night Lord, receive the item. There is an alternative. If a player fails the Tricephalos expedition enough times, the old pocket watch can drop as a reward even from a failed run. The game does not require a successful outcome to produce the key that unlocks the sibling reunion. The lore dimension of this is worth considering. The revelation that the priestess is the Wylder's sister does not require him to have won. It requires him to have been in the expedition, to have faced what the knight placed in his path, to have received what the knight chose to give him regardless of whether the fight went well. The hold does not withhold the reunion until the Wylder proves himself worthy of it. It offers the key through the attempt as much as through the success. The sister who has been waiting is available to be found whether the brother arrives victorious or not. Fact 47. The Duchess's title comes from stolen identity. She is a stepdaughter, not a natural-born noble. The Duchess's full description in the game's character lore is specific about her origin. Virtuous thief and stepdaughter of the Viscount. The title she carries, the Duchess, is not hers by blood. It came from her connection to the Viscount through the stepdaughter relationship, which is itself a connection acquired, rather than inherited. The title Duchess is also, in the lore's framing, something she earned through her own action. Her ability to swiftly escape anyone's grasp with ease earned her the title. Not inherited from the Viscount, not granted by the Viscount, earned through the particular quality of her movement, which the people who observed it labelled. A stepdaughter who earns a noble title through theft, or through the refined skill of escape that theft at a certain level requires, is someone whose identity is entirely constructed rather than given. The Duchess assembled what she is from parts that were not handed to her. The stepdaughter relationship to the Viscount, the righteous thief reputation, the title that came from a quality the people around her named, the white robe and the silver mask in the hold, which were the iron menial's suggestion. None of it was hers at birth. All of it is hers. Fact 48. The iron menial told the Duchess to change her clothes in his first letter to her. The letter the iron menial wrote to the Duchess shortly after she was summoned to the hold is preserved in the lore, and it is one of his more revealing documents. He welcomed her with the enthusiasm of someone who had been waiting for this specific person for a specific reason. He described the garden's flowers and the study's rare books, offering the hold's amenities with the care of someone who had prepared the space for her arrival. And then, at the end, the practical note. Perhaps you'd be amicable to a change of attire. You are a righteous thief no longer. Now you are the honourable priestess of the hold. It is the gentlest possible way to say, the person who arrives here leaves the name they came with. The hold requires a different presentation from her. The righteous thief is who she was before the hold called her. The priestess is what the hold needs her to be. She agreed. She wore the white robe and the silver mask. The iron menial asked her preferences for meals. The hold was ready to receive the others, with the Duchess at its centre, waiting in the attire the hold required of her, rather than the attire she had chosen for herself. Fact 49. The Duchess's life is bound to the Roundtable hold. When the hold fades, she fades with it. This is the fact at the centre of the Wylder's arc that transforms the reunion into something more complicated than a simple recovery of what was lost. The Duchess's connection to the hold is not only institutional, it is existential. She is the priestess of the hold in the specific sense that the hold's survival is the condition of her survival. When the Night Lord falls and the hold completes its purpose and begins to dissolve, the Duchess dissolves with it. The strands of grace that carry the other Nightfarers back to the Erd Tree carry her as well. The difference is that the other Nightfarers were summoned to the hold and will return to their lives when it is done. The Duchess was the hold's centre. The hold was built around her in a way it was not built around the others. The Wylder lost his entire clan on Windwale Knoll. He came to the hold and found his sister. The hold told him, through its mechanics, that ending the night means losing her again. This is the weight the law places on the final expedition. Defeating the Night Lord is the goal. The cost of achieving the goal is the person he came to find. Archikey. Fact 50. The silver tear throbbed in the Wylder's hands. The silver tear, the object the Wylder acquires in Limveld as part of his questline, does something when he holds it that the lore describes with precision. It gently throbbed. Not a sound, not a visible change. A sensation transmitted through the hands. Silver tears in the original Elden Ring are objects associated with the silver tears that serve Renala, and with the mimic tear ash of war, mimicry, and transformation, and the particular magic of the Korean tradition that works with moonlight and reflection. In Nightreign, a silver tear throbbing in the Wylder's grip is the object responding to him in a way that objects in the lands between sometimes respond to the people they have a connection with. The Wylder does not understand what the response means when it happens. The dream he woke from had placed the earring in his mind and the brooch by his belongings, and then the silver tear in his hands. The sequence points in a direction he cannot yet read. The silver tear was responding to his presence the way the earring had been waiting for its counterpart. The objects that connect him to his sister recognize him. He does not yet recognize them. Fact 51. The Raider is the most concerned about the Duchess's well-being among all the Nightfarers. The Raider, whose story is primarily organized around his rivalry with the White Horn and his relationship to his own identity as the Black Claw, has a secondary characterization in the hold that the lore notes. He is the Nightfarer who expresses the most explicit concern for the Duchess among all those at the table. The concern is not explained through any particular incident or shared history. It appears to arise from the Raider's nature as the person at the hold who most easily forms protective attachments, whose instinct is to extend care to the people around him in the direct, uncomplicated way of someone who grew up in a culture where the person beside you in a fight is a person you protect. The Duchess is the hold center. She is the priestess who received everyone, who has been managing the hold's operations while the Nightfarers went on their expeditions. The Raider notices her. He voices his concern. Among the various Nightfarers whose stories are about what they lost, the Raider finds space to attend to the person who has been tending to all of them. Almeki Quim. Fact 52. The Wylder is described as having a sixth sense for combat, not skill alone. The character description for the Wylder in the game's official materials is specific about the nature of his ability. He is not described as skilled, or trained, or experienced. He is described as a nomadic swordsman with a stunning sixth sense for combat. The distinction matters. Skill and training are qualities acquired through practice. A sixth sense is something different, an instinctive capacity that operates below the level of deliberate technique, an awareness that functions before the analysis kicks in. The Wylder does not fight by knowing what to do. He fights by knowing before he knows what he knows. This quality is consistent with his clan background. A nomadic warrior culture that moves through changing landscapes and faces unfamiliar opponents cannot rely on the fixed techniques of a stable tradition. The sixth sense is what you develop when the opponent in front of you is always new and the situation is always shifting. The Wylder's Knoll was called Windwell, the gale that howls. The warrior who grew up there learned to feel the change in the wind before it arrives. Sleep well. Tomorrow we follow the Guardian's cursed wing, the recluse's borrowed knowledge, and the specific facts about both that the quest line does not stop long enough to examine. The Guardian and the Recluse share a quest line that the game presents as a story about forgiveness. It is that, but it is also a story about something more specific. What happens when the person who helped you was also, in ways that require careful accounting, the person who harmed you? The facts buried in their joint arc are some of the most precise in Nightreign's lore. 13 of them tonight. Fact 53. The cursed weapon that destroyed the Guardian's flock has a name. The Guardian arrives at the hold knowing his flock was destroyed by a curse. He knows the curse was delivered through weapons. He knows the wings of the pinion folk were the target. What he does not know, at first, is the name of the thing that was used against his people. The name is Icterus. It appears in the 3rd volume of curse texts the Guardian collects during his expeditions in Limveld, where the description is preserved with unusual specificity. The curse is the product of a sorcery from deep within a distant land, a script put down in blood. The Guardian reads about this variety of magic. He recognizes it. He has been studying this kind of sorcery under the tutelage of his teacher at the hold, because knowledge and knowing lead to protection, which is the belief he has been operating under since he arrived. Icterus is not described as a sword or a spear. It is described as a cursed weapon, a category that encompasses the instrument and the working together. The blades that struck the pinion folk in the battle carried the Icterus curse within them. The blades themselves were the vector. The curse was the thing the blades were carrying. He reads the name in the 3rd volume and recognizes the magic. He knows now. Fact 54. Icterus was originally a weather charm, built to quell storms and save lives. This is the detail that transforms the Guardian's questline from a straightforward story of betrayal into something more complicated. The Recluse did not create Icterus as a weapon. She created it as a charm to dispel strong winds. Its original purpose was the protection of the people who used it from weather that could kill them. Something that was built to save lives was twisted into the instrument that destroyed them. The Recluse's magic, which had been turned toward a benevolent purpose, was repurposed by someone or by some process that the law preserves with intentional ambiguity. The Witch's Brooch, the item at the center of the Guardian's final choice, holds within it the residue of what the charm originally was, protection from winds, now expressed as the decision the Guardian must make about what protection means when the person who built your enemy's weapon was also your teacher. The law does not resolve whether the Recluse was complicit in the repurposing, or only the originator of what was later twisted. She admits to her role. She expresses remorse. She does not specify the precise degree of her involvement in the transformation from weather charm to curse. The ambiguity is the point. Fact 55. The Witch's Brooch contains the magic of Icterus. The two outcomes of the Guardian's final choice in his quest line are represented by the same object in two states. The Witch's Brooch, whole, is the reward for forgiveness. The cracked Witch's Brooch is the reward for punishment. The brooch is not only a meaningful token, according to the law, it is the magical anchor of the Icterus curse. The magic that powered Icterus, the weather charm turned weapon that destroyed the Pinion Folk's ability to fly, is contained within the brooch. When the Guardian smashes the brooch, he is not only punishing the recluse, he is destroying the thing that carries the curse's power. When he keeps the brooch whole, he is keeping the curse's anchor and accepting that its existence and the recluse's continued relationship to what it holds is something he can live with. The object does not stop being what it is because he forgives her. It remains the witch's brooch, holding what it holds. The forgiveness is a decision about what to do with that fact, not a decision that changes the fact itself. Baesde Fact 56. The Guardian's motto is a direct statement of why he studies what destroyed his people. Knowledge and knowing lead to protection. This is what the Guardian believed of the knowledge he gained under the recluse's tutelage. The sentence appears in the journal at the moment he has found the text that will lead him to understand Icterus, and it reads as both an expression of belief and an irony that the law does not underline. He studied curses under the teacher who was connected to the curse that destroyed his flock. The motto he held while studying was that understanding what can harm leads to the ability to prevent harm. He was right about the motto's general principle. The application, in his specific case, produced knowledge of something he would rather not have found. The belief did not lead him to protection in the end. It led him to the truth about his teacher. The Guardian's philosophy is vindicated and devastated in the same discovery. Fact 57. The Guardian specifically collects volumes about curses during expeditions in Limveld. The questline mechanic for the Guardian's remembrance is not a series alone of conversations in the hold. It requires the Guardian to collect specific books during expeditions in Limveld. 3 volumes, each one contributing to his understanding of what was done to the Pinion Folk. The volumes are physical objects found in the world of Limveld, which means the Guardian's research into his own people's destruction is conducted out in the night itself, between fights, among the enemies and hazards that the expeditions produce. He brings back what he finds. He reads what he has found. He returns to the hold with more knowledge than he left with. This structure is characteristic of how the game handles memory and revelation, through active engagement with the world rather than through passive receipt of information. The Guardian does not remember what happened to his flock. He researches it. The night he is fighting in contains the evidence of what was done to his people, and he gathers that evidence expedition by expedition. Fact 58. The raider tried to gift the Guardian a Pinion Folk helmet and was refused. The raider's instinct to care for the people around him, which expresses itself most visibly in his concern for the Duchess, produces a specific moment in the Guardian's lore. The raider found a helmet belonging to the Pinion Folk's tradition and brought it to the Guardian as a gift. The journal preserves the exchange with the raider's characteristic voice, bold and boisterous. He urged the Guardian to put it on, told him he had fixed it up, declared it would be perfect for a fine knight of his stature. He was, the journal notes, a terrible meddler and willful in his way. The Guardian batted the helmet away. He had laid down his helm long ago. The helmet the raider brought was a symbol of the flock and the regiment and the things that were gone. He was not going to wear it, not because it was unwelcome, but because the wearing of it would have been the wrong relationship to what it represented. The raider had meant well. He always means well. The Guardian understood this. The helmet went back to wherever the raider had found it. Fact 59. The confrontation between the Guardian and the recluse happens on a cliffside. When the Guardian learns that the recluse was connected to the Ictaris curse and goes to confront her, the law places the scene on a cliffside, not inside the hold, not at the table, not in the garden where the hold's flowers grow. On a cliffside, at the edge of something. The location is not arbitrary. The cliffside is the edge of the hold's territory, the place where the building's protective environment gives way to the open. The most difficult conversation the hold produces happens at its boundary. She was there. She did not run. She nodded her head and said she knew the laws of the Guardian's people. Thou wilt not suffer those who endanger the flock to remain. She said this before he said anything. She knew what he had found, and she knew what his tradition required of him when someone endangered the flock, and she named that requirement aloud, with the precision of someone who had been carrying the weight of knowing what she had done and what it would in time produce. She had been helping him research the curse that would lead to this moment. The law holds open whether she did this knowing where the research would lead, or whether the help was its own thing, and the knowledge was a separate gift. She helped, he found. He came to the cliffside. She was already there. Fact 60. The recluse offered herself to the Guardian's judgment without qualification. When the Guardian arrived at the cliffside, the recluse did not argue. She did not offer context that would mitigate the finding. She apologized and offered herself to him without qualification. His to do with as he saw fit, as recompense for the role she had played in the destruction of his people. The phrase she used is specific: recompense. Not absolution, not forgiveness requested. Recompense, the material settling of an account. She had taken something that could not be returned, the flock, the regiment, the formation that the Guardian had known in his body across years of shared flight. She could not give that back. She could give him the power to end her, and she did. His response to the offer is what the questline's two outcomes are built from. The witch's brooch for forgiveness, the cracked witch's brooch for punishment. In the forgiveness outcome, the recluse is astonished by his mercy, but honors his decision. In the punishment outcome, the thing that contained the curse's power is destroyed in the act of deciding. Neither outcome returns the flock. Both outcomes are real. Fact 61. The recluse's name is not Recluse. She is a witch of the deep woods. The name the other Nightfarers use for her is not the name she was born to or chose. It is what she has become to others. The one who keeps to herself. The one in the corners during the quiet hours. The one with the books. The recluse. Her own journal opens with the correction. Though my fellows call me by the name of Recluse, mine origin is as one of many, a witch of the deep woods. The deep woods, the old name, places her in the tradition of the forest witches of the lands between's wider world, a tradition distinct from the Carian sorcery, and from the Erd-tree's incantations, and from the dark arts tradition the Nightreign lore draws on elsewhere. She uses the archaic form in her own journal. Mine origin remaineth the formal register of someone who learned a way of speaking in a tradition that predates the hold and speaks that way by habit. The Nightfarers call her Recluse. She calls herself something older. Fact 62. the recluse's beloved infant was never given a true name. It was called the Gnawling. The being the recluse is searching for throughout her time in the hold is described consistently as her beloved infant. It is not a human child. It is a being she birthed through magical means, a construct or creation produced through the deep arts of the forest witches. She made it, and it is hers in the sense that what a practitioner creates is theirs. The naming of it tells the story of what it is. It was never a true name bequeathed, the law specifies. The name that was used was not the formal giving of a name but something spoken with a certain mirth. The Gnawling, a creature that gnaws, a being defined by its appetite, by the consuming quality that was its most visible characteristic from the beginning, named in mirth, with a lightness that sometimes accompanies a name that captures something true. The Gnawling gnaws. The name acknowledged what the infant was without treating that quality as a condemnation. The recluse made a being that devours without end, and called it a gnawling with a certain mirth, and then watched it kill her companion. Fact 63. The gnawling devoured without end. The witch of the wheel was its nurse and feeder. The infant the recluse created was not a manageable being. It devoured without end. The description is persistent across the lore. The hunger was constant. The satisfaction never lasted. The consuming quality that the name Gnawling identified was the infant's governing nature. The witch of the wheel took on the role of nurse, the one who fed the infant, who managed its hunger, who kept the consuming quality directed rather than uncontrolled. The witch was the person who stood between the gnawling's hunger and the world's ability to survive it. She was equipped for this by the cunning and deceit that the law describes as her defining quality. The woman who used guile as sword and shield was the person trusted with an insatiable creature. They used the gnawling as a weapon in a later battle. The logic was that the creature's consuming quality could be directed at an enemy. It could. The creature consumed the enemy. It then turned on its summoners. It did not distinguish. The witch of the wheel was killed in the chaos. The recluse failed to offer the comfort the frightened child needed in the moment before that happened. She has been carrying this since. Fact 64. The witch of the wheel was resurrected by the Night Lord's power and disguised herself as the Iron Menial. This is the most surprising detail in the recluse's arc, and one of the most significant revelations in the Hold's interior narrative. The witch of the wheel, whom the recluse had believed dead since the infant turned on them, was not permanently dead. The Night Lord's power restored her in the particular way that the knight's relationship to death sometimes restores what has died. She returned to the hold. She did not announce herself. She attacked the Iron Menial and locked him in the crypt. She took his likeness and moved through the hold in his form, performing his functions, present in the hold as him for long enough that her presence was normalized. The recluse's suspicion was aroused in time by detecting the witch's magic within the vestige of night. She sought her out. The confrontation happens in the realm of remembrance, at the sparring grounds, where the figure polishing a sword in the Iron Menial's likeness is found. The attack on the puppet is the moment the recluse chooses to confront what she has been searching for. Not only her infant, but her old companion, restored by the night and wearing a borrowed face. The Iron Menial she had been speaking to between expeditions, whose care she had received and whose presence had been one of the stable facts of the hold, was not always him. Fact 65. The Guardian knew, as he studied the curse, that the research would lead to his teacher. The law's most delicate ambiguity in the Guardian's quest line is whether the Guardian understood, as he collected volumes and studied curse magic under the recluse's guidance, where the research was going. The journal entry that describes his motivation is the motto: knowledge and knowing lead to protection. The belief is stated as the reason he studies, but the recluse, who nodded and said she knew the laws of his people before he accused her, had been helping him with research she knew would expose her. The question the law raises without answering is whether the Guardian knew he was following a trail that led to his teacher, whether some part of him understood what the research would find and chose to pursue it with that understanding, rather than despite it. The Pinion folk law she quoted before he accused her is specific. Thou wilt not suffer those who endanger the flock to remain. She had endangered the flock. She knew the law. She helped him find the evidence that would bring him to the cliffside with the law in mind. He came to the cliffside with his halberd. She offered herself. The law does not say how long he stood there before making his choice. Sleep well. Tomorrow we follow the pirate and the doll more closely, and the details about both of them that the main lore series did not have time to slow down for. Two Nightfarers tonight, whose stories are built around identity. One who wore someone else's name on his head for years and had to fight to give it back, and one who wore someone else's identity in her memories and had to unravel it to find her own. The Raider and the Revenant share less lore overlap than the Guardian and the Recluse, but the parallel between them is there if you look. 13 facts about both. Fact 66. The Raider had a first mate named Weathervane, who recorded his fights to sell. The Raider's backstory on the coastal waters includes a figure who does not appear in the Hold's present, but survives in the Raider's memory of his previous life. His first mate was Weathervane. The name is the lore's only description of him, and it fits the person described. The memory that surfaces in the Raider's questline places them on the coast after a wave has knocked the Raider onto the shore and he has struck his own helmet in response, producing a gush of blood he pays no attention to. Weathervane called out to him, then sighed, then was observed making notes. The Raider noticed. Weathervane explained without apology. He had front row seats to a duel to the death between two bloody beasts, and figured he could make a fortune if he got the details down. He was recording the Raiders' fights for profit, not secretly, not apologetically. The Raider found this funny enough, or characterful enough, that the memory stuck. His first mate believed that there was a market for the story of what the Black Claw and the White Horn were doing to each other on the coastal waters, and he was probably right. Weathervane, whose instinct was to read the wind of what was worth preserving, had recognized the story before the Raider himself understood it as a story. Might. Fact 67. In the final boss fight of his remembrance, Whitehorn mirrors the Raider's own appearance. The final encounter with the Whitehorn in the Raider's remembrance quest is structured around a visual detail that the fight makes impossible to miss. In the first phase, the Whitehorn does not fight as himself. He takes on the Raider's appearance, wielding twin colossal weapons, using the Raider's own retaliate skill against its owner. The mirror is deliberate. The rivalry between Blackclaw and Whitehorn is a rivalry between two people who were, in the culture that produced them, versions of the same thing. Two pirates of the coastal waters, each one the other's measure. The fight that determines the rivalry's conclusion begins with the Raider fighting his own reflection. The second phase returns the Whitehorn to his own form, the version of him that survived the Knight's corruption. What the Raider defeats is not the pure rival he remembered from the coastal waters. It is the rival as the Knight has made him, changed by whatever the Knight does to people it claims. Defeating a mirror of yourself and then defeating the corrupted version of someone who once served as your measure of worth. The raider had said the rival was the challenge he wished for. He was right, and the fight the wish produced was more complicated than a straight contest. Fact 68. After the tourney, the Iron Eye asked why they never settled who rules the coastal waters. When the raider returned from completing the tourney of the lands between, he did not announce the outcome with the expansive boasting that characterized his usual social presence. The Iron Eye, who had been paying attention to the raider's story across the time they had spent together in the hold, asked him a question. "Whitehorn and Black Claw," the Iron Eye said. "Intriguing story." But he had heard they never settled who would rule the coastal waters. Why not? The law does not record the raider's answer to this question. The question is asked, and the scene ends. The territory question, which was the practical expression of what the rivalry was supposedly about on the coastal waters, is left open by the Iron Eye's pointed observation. Two people fought for years for dominance of a region, and neither of them settled it. The unsettled territory is the point. The coastal waters were not what the rivalry was for. The rival was what it was for. The Iron Eye understood this and asked the question that exposed it. The raider's lack of a recorded answer is the answer. Fact 69. A monument in the hold records the rivalry, engraved with names and battle records. When the raider completes the final stage of his quest line, a monument in the Roundtable hold receives an inscription. The monument is described as engraved with names of challengers and their records. It is a physical object in the hold's architecture, a permanent record in stone of what happened in the tourney and in the broader rivalry that preceded it. The inscription reads, "The Black Claw defeated the White Horn to achieve victory. Ye souls felled in battle, be proud of thine exploits." The second sentence is not addressed to the raider or to the Whitehorn specifically. It addresses all the souls felled in battle, the general category of people who fought and lost, the rivals who did not survive their rivalries. The monument is both a specific record and a broader statement about what the culture of the coastal waters values in the people who lived it. The exploits, not only the outcome. The raider stood before it and read it, his name in the record, the rival's name in the record. Weathervane, somewhere in the raider's memory of the coastal waters, was probably already composing the version of the story he would sell. Fact 70. After returning the helmet, the only sensation the lore describes is a gentle wind. When the raider returned the Whitehorn's helmet to its owner and became Black Claw again, the lore's description of the moment is precise in what it focuses on. Not the relief of resolution, not the grief of a rivalry that was over, not the triumph of having found and defeated a lost rival at the end of years of waiting. A gentle wind brushed his cheek. It is the smallest possible sensory detail. Wind, not described as strong or significant, not carrying meaning in the way wind carries meaning in symbolic traditions. A gentle wind, the kind of thing you feel when you are standing somewhere open and the air moves. The kind of sensation that registers when you are still enough to feel it. The raider, who had been in motion for years, carrying the helmet and the rivalry and the anticipation of the fight that would resolve them, had reached the moment after the resolution. The motion had stopped. The wind moved across a face that was no longer defined by what it was pursuing. The lore chose to describe this moment through its least dramatic sensory detail, and in doing so, made it the most quiet and the most complete. Fact 71. The Black Claw necklace relic, earned at the end of his quest line, has a specific mechanical poetry. The relic the raider receives at the completion of his quest line is the Black Claw necklace. its mechanical properties are 3 additional points of poise, health restoration when defeating enemies near a totem stela, and an increase in art gauge generation. Poise is the measure of a fighter's ability to take a hit without being staggered. The raider's description specifies that his poise allows him to stand firm against moderate attacks. The necklace adds to the quality that defines him, the capacity to absorb punishment and keep moving. The Black Claw identity, restored at the end of the quest line, comes with an increase in the capacity to stand firm. The health restoration near the totem stela connects the relic's benefit to the raider's distinctive combat mechanic, the pole he plants in the ground that enables certain abilities and creates a point of power. The necklace rewards fighting in relationship to the totem, which is the raider's natural style. The identity recovery and the mechanical recovery are the same thing. The name on the necklace is Black Claw. The helmet had been Whitehorn for years. The relic marks whose name he ended with. Fact 72. The coastal pirate culture values rivals over territory. The ionized question about the unsettled coastal waters territory and the raider's non-answer point toward the most interesting cultural detail the raider's lore preserves. The pirates of the coastal waters love nothing more than a worthy rival. The lore states this as an absolute, nothing more. Not victory, not territory, not wealth or reputation or the things that piracy usually pursues. A worthy rival. This makes the Whitehorn's corruption by the night a specific kind of loss for the raider, distinct from the grief of a person who has lost a friend or an enemy. The corruption was a desecration of the thing the coastal waters culture valued above all else. A rival is someone who makes you more than you are alone, whose opposition produces the version of yourself that the fight requires. A corrupted rival is a rival who can no longer perform that function. The raider came to the lands between to fight the Night Lord. His intuition told him it was the challenge he wished for. When he arrived at the hold, he knew he was right. He did not know, when he arrived, that the hold would also contain the chance to fight the Whitehorn one more time. The Night Lord was the challenge he came for. The Whitehorn was the gift the hold added. Fact 73. The girl's name was Chloe. Daphne was the doll's name. The revelation at the center of the Revenant's remembrance quest is that the identity she has been carrying, the daughter of the Northern Croft family, was never hers. She arrived at the hold believing she was Daphne. She is not. The girl was Chloe. Daphne is the name Chloe gave her beloved doll. The name Daphne is Greek for laurel. The laurel tree, or the laurel wreath, the symbol of achievement and memory in Greek tradition. A laurel crown for the thing that was loved, the object that was given a name from a tradition of honoring what endures. Chloe named her doll after something that persists. The doll then persisted, in the specific and unexpected way the lore describes, past the moment Chloe did not. The identity inversion means that the Revenant spent her early time in the hold believing she was the person who had named her, inhabiting the memories of the person who had loved her, being the thing that was cherished rather than the thing that was cherished. The correcting of this confusion is not a lore revelation alone. It is the Revenant learning, for the first time, which side of the love she occupies. Fact 74. The doll was carved by Chloe's grandfather. The origin of the Daphne doll is preserved in the Revenant's journal. The Revenant, in a memory that surfaces from her early existence as a doll, thinks of herself in her original form. She was my darling baby, carved by my grandfather. This line is written in the Revenant's voice, but from the perspective of Chloe. whose memories she carries. The grandfather who carved the doll made an object of craft and love, the specific product of a family whose tradition was puppetry, whose identity was built around the making of figures that moved and had presence. The Northerncroft family made puppets. The grandfather made a doll for his granddaughter. The doll outlived the family. The craft lineage matters for the Revenant's nature. The Northerncroft family had been working with the particular magic of objects that hold presence for long enough that the doll they made was receptive to what happened on the night of the storm. The grandfather's work was the material condition that allowed Chloe's final act of feeling to take root in the figure he had carved. He built something capable of receiving what she gave it. Fact 75. The night is consuming the Revenant, even in the doll's body. Black streaks appear on her cheeks. The Revenant's journal contains a description that establishes something the player who fights with her might not think about. She looks in the mirror when she wakes. This is her consistent practice, checking the sensations running through her against what the mirror shows. The reason for the checking is what the mirror reveals. Black streaks have appeared upon her cheeks. The night is eating away at her, not at a living body, at a human being with the vulnerabilities of flesh, at the doll's frame, the material form she inhabits, the body the grandfather carved. The night pursues her, she notes with an odd tone, even in this form. It seems she is cherished by the night, she writes, to think it would still give chase. The cherishing she describes is the night's consuming attention. The night knows she is there and is doing what the night does to what it claims, eating at it, leaving marks, the black streaks visible on the cheeks of the carved face. Fact 76. The Revenant conceals the night's damage when she looks in the mirror. The detail that follows the discovery of the black streaks is the most quietly significant in the Revenant's journals. In the mirror, she conceals the ways in which the night eats away at her. She looks. She sees the damage. She conceals it. The verb is specific. She does not stop the damage, does not seek to heal it, does not report it to the other Nightfarers. She conceals it. The mirror is a private space where she knows what is happening to her, and what she does with that knowledge is to hide it. The Revenant who moves through the hold, who fights in the expeditions, who stood in the hold's eastern room waiting to be unlocked, is hiding the night's consumption from the people around her. She arrived from a night that destroyed her household. She is being consumed by the night in the hold. She manages this by concealing it in the mirror. The private keeping of damage is the Revenant's characteristic relationship to what is happening to her. She does not know yet, at this point in the journals, that she is the doll. She knows she is being eaten. She keeps it in the mirror. Fact 77. When the Revenant uses her ultimate ability, a skull is visible inside her face. The Revenant's ultimate ability, the action that costs the full art gauge and produces the most powerful effect she can perform, includes a visual detail that the speed of combat tends to obscure. When the ultimate triggers, a skull is briefly visible inside the doll's face. The detail is not decorative. The Revenant is a doll, which means she has no anatomy. The skull inside the face is not her skull. It is a feature of the construction, or a feature of how the night has marked her, or a feature of what the doll's body contains that the grandfather's craft placed there before the Revenant understood what she was. One reading from the community. The creator used actual human remains as the internal structure of the doll's mold. The skull is the record of whatever was used in the making. If this is correct, the Revenant's body contains the bones of someone else, unnamed, worked into the construction that Chloe's love then animated. The full implications of the skull are not resolved by the law. It is a detail visible for a moment during a combat animation, preserved for the player who slows down enough to look. Fact 78. The Revenant is the only Nightfarer whose moveset is specific to a single weapon, not a weapon type. All of the Nightfarers have custom movesets built for their preferred weapon categories. The Wylder fights with greatswords in a way that expresses his character. The Raider fights with colossal weapons in a way that expresses his. The Guardian's shield fighting is his own. Each Nightfarer's movement is distinctive within the general category of weapons they prefer. The Revenant is different. Her moveset is not built for a weapon type. It is built for a specific weapon. The one weapon that produces the particular set of actions that characterizes how she fights. Any other weapon in her hands is handled through a standard moveset. Only her signature weapon produces the movement that is uniquely hers. The lore implication is that the Revenant's combat identity is narrower and more precise than the other Nightfarers. She is not a generalized doll with a fighting style. She is a specific doll with one specific way of moving that is hers, and any other movement is borrowed rather than native. There is also a community note worth preserving. A popular joke among Nightreign players was the image of the Revenant, a small doll-like figure, wielding a colossal weapon far too large for her frame. The ever-dark Sovereign Libra fight appears to have officially acknowledged this. One of the clones it spawns is a Revenant holding a greatsword and great crusher. The Knight has a sense of humor, or the developers do, which in From Software's universe amounts to the same thing. Sleep well. Tomorrow we follow the assassin and his traitor in more detail, and the facts about the Fellowship, the centipedal scions, and the edge of order that the main series moved past quickly. 3 Nightfarers tonight, whose stories are built around duty and what it costs. The Iron Eye, who wrote reports to a custodian he had no way to deliver them to, who found a sealed letter in his own effects and asked permission to open it, who ended the night and then ended something else. The Executor, who carries 2 identities at once and performed a ritual of ending that did not end him. The Undertaker, sent to the lands between by people who hoped she would not return. 13 facts. Fact 79. The Iron Eye kept writing reports to Isolde, even when he had no way to send them. The Iron Eye's professional habits survived the Hold's isolation from the Fellowship's operational network. One of his journal entries is formatted as a field report to Isolde, his custodian, and it opens with a line that would be unremarkable if not for what follows. I have no means to deliver this report, but here shall I record my progress. He is writing a report that will never reach its destination. The trail has led him to the Roundtable Hold, where the ordinary channels of communication with the Fellowship do not function. He cannot send what he is writing. He writes it anyway, because writing reports is the structure through which he organizes what he knows, and the structure is worth maintaining, even when the function it serves is temporarily unavailable. He notes that he has made an ally who goes by the name of Priestess. The Duchess, who has been waiting in the hold for her brother and managing the hold's functions in the meantime, is described in his report as an ally with a name. He does not know who she is. He knows she is useful and that the work proceeds as usual. The professionalism that makes him note her name and nothing else in a report he cannot send for a custodian who has not heard from him is a specific kind of character detail. Chart. Fact 80. The traitor's code name. Within the Fellowship was the monster. The Fellowship's operational language for the being the Iron Eye was sent to find and retire used a specific designation. Not the traitor, which is how the Hold's narrative describes him. The monster. The instructions from Isolde to the Ionai name him this way consistently. He is a brother of the Fellowship. He is the monster. Take every precaution. The code name is not affectionate. It is the Fellowship's assessment of what a centipedal scion, who had stopped cooperating with the organization's purposes, had become, or had always been, beneath the cooperation. The traitor calls himself the traitor when the Ionai finds him in the crypt. He uses the word without the Fellowship's assessment of what he was. The word that describes the act he performed, the turning against the organization, rather than the word that describes what the organization thought he was. He accepted the accusation of betrayal. He did not accept the designation that the Fellowship had assigned to him. The Ionai, in his report, uses the Fellowship's language, the monster, the brother. He was raised by the Fellowship to be the centipedal scion he is, after all. The last sentence is Isolde's, and it contains the Fellowship's entire relationship to what it had created. Ours. Fact 81. The boarding house in Dusken Valley was where both the traitor's guardian and the Ionai's guardian were killed. The event that set the Ionai's mission in motion was the destruction of the boarding house in Dusken Valley, which was where the Fellowship maintained the structure that had raised and trained the centipedal scions. The Ionai's guardian, the person whose role was to raise and train him and make him capable of the work the Fellowship would assign him, was killed in this destruction. The traitor's guardian was also killed there. The law connects both of them to the same event, the same place, the same loss. The Ionai was sent to pursue the traitor as a consequence of the destruction at Dusken Valley. The traitor had lost his guardian to the same destruction that began the Ionai's mission. They were both shaped by the same boarding house. Both lost the person who had made them who they were in the same attack. The Fellowship framed this for the Ionai as the traitor having caused the destruction. The Ionai pursued the traitor as a consequence. The traitor waited for him in the crypt. Both of them carried the loss of Dusken Valley. One of them was sent to execute the other for it. Fact 82. The Ionai asked Isolde's permission before opening a sealed letter found in his own effects. Among the journal entries is a postscript to one of the Ionai's reports that reveals the particular character of his relationship to the Fellowship's protocols. He found a sealed missive among his own effects, a letter that someone had placed in his possession, addressed to him, sealed with the stamp of an assassin's contract. His postscript to Isolde reads, "I found a sealed missive amongst my effects. In accordance with protocol, I shall open it, unless advised otherwise, Master." He asked permission to open a letter addressed to him. The letter was in his effects. It was his to open. But protocol, the Fellowship structure for managing information flow, governed even private correspondence, and he observed the protocol before acting on the obvious. He would open it unless Isolde told him not to. The letter was from the traitor. It was an invitation. The assassin sent to retire the traitor received, in his own effects, a letter from the traitor inviting him to the meeting that the mission required. The Ionai, who had asked permission to open it, now had directions and a destination. Fact 83. Isolde's most revealing letter openly stated that the scions were made to be discarded. The letter that the Ionai found in his effects was from the traitor. There was another letter, a different one, that the traitor's argument about the Fellowship had been built around. When the traitor was executed, he told the Ionai something worth knowing, as promised, and the something was in a letter Isolde had written. The letter was the one the traitor had referenced in his argument. In it, Isolde had written, "The scions of the Fellowship are fated to be disposed of once they play their part." she had written it. The custodian who sent the Iron Eye to retire the traitor, who had written to him with the professional language of operational management, had also written a sentence that named outright what the Fellowship's relationship to its scions was. They were built, they were used, they were disposed of. Isolde had walked the statement back in the same letter. It was pure balderdash, she said, spoken in frustration. She asked the Iron Eye to free himself of his misgivings and walk the path in which he believed. The Iron Eye read both sentences. He completed the mission. He addressed his final letter to her as guardian, not as custodian. Fact 84. The Iron Eye's final letter called Isolde his guardian, not his custodian. The professional relationship the Fellowship maintained between Isolde and the Iron Eye used a specific word, custodian. She was his custodian. He was her operative. The language of institutional hierarchy, distributed through letters written in the professional register of operational management. The final letter the Iron Eye wrote to Isolde does not use this word. You were the finest guardian one could hope for. The shift from custodian to guardian is not explained in the text. It does not need to be. The custodian is the institutional role. The guardian is the person who raised him, who made him, whose care produced what he became. He also wrote, I desired freedom from the yoke of the Fellowship only because you showed me it was possible. The letter that had mentioned the foolish dream, the endless night for the scions, had been enough. He had read her acknowledge the possibility of something other than the Fellowship's purposes, and that acknowledgement had become the direction he moved in at the end. The postscript added, Fear not, Master. My mind is clear. He then went and kept the night from ending. Fact 85. The Iron Eye described his final act in a postscript, rather than the main body of the letter. The structure of the Iron Eye's final communication with Isolde contains a characteristic detail about how he operates. The main body of the letter is the personal statement, the gratitude, the acknowledgement of what she was to him, the freedom her example had made possible. The final act, the thing he did that the entire arc had been building toward, is in the postscript. P.S. Fear not, Master. My mind is clear. A postscript is an addition after the main content, something noted after the primary communication was already complete. The Iron Eye placed the most significant information he had in the position that conventions of letter writing assigned to secondary material. The emotional content of the relationship was the main body. The act of keeping the night was the postscript. The Iron Eye, who had been writing reports in proper operational format since the beginning of his time in the hold, organized his final communication in the precise structure his training had taught him. The substantive content, then the additional note at the end. Fact 86. The Executor's fight against his own reflection is titled Executor's Cry. The remembrance sequence for the Executor culminates in a fight against a version of himself. The encounter has a title, Executor's Cry. The title names the moment rather than the opponent, framing the fight as an emotional event rather than a combat event. The reflection uses the Executor's own moveset. This is not unusual for From Software's mirrored boss encounters, which have a consistent tradition across the catalogue of placing the player against a version of themselves as a dramatic climax. What is specific to the Executor's version is the title's emotional charge. Not Executor's Double, not Executor's Shadow, Executor's Cry. The fight is against what the failure produced in him. The version of himself that could not protect the painter, that performed the seppuku that did not take, that has been carrying the weight of Windwale Knoll and the painter's shed through the Hold's expeditions. The cry the title refers to is not a combat cry. It is the kind of sound a person makes when the thing they have been carrying becomes, for a moment, externalized. He fights it. He wins. The weight does not disappear, but it has been faced from the outside rather than only from within. 1. Fact 87. The painter called the executor my guest, not her guardian. The portrait the painter made of the executor is preserved in the law, and the text she wrote to accompany it uses a specific word for him. Not her protector, not her assigned guardian, her guest. A crucible holds a composite, she wrote. My guest could not bear to render a judgment. Here at the painter's shed, overlooking the Erd tree, until the very end. She perceived what he was before the crisis arrived. A crucible holds a composite. She saw the two faces in him, the painter and the warrior. She noted that he could not bear to render a judgment, which is an observation about the specific quality that would matter when the crucible knight arrived to execute him and could not. She wrote this in the portrait's caption as a character note, something she had observed in her guest, the person who had come into her space and whose presence she had received. The word guest is the one she chose, someone who comes and stays for a time and whose presence is received rather than claimed. The executor had been assigned to her space in some capacity. She called him her guest. The distinction carries the whole of their relationship's character. Fact 88. The executor's body fused with his armor, because he is a condemned soul. The physical description of the executor in the game's character lore includes a detail that explains why the seppuku did not produce the death it was intended to produce. His body is fused with his armor. The pieces of the Crucible Knight's armor that he wears have merged with the flesh beneath them over time, in the way that the Crucible sometimes produces in those who are in its nature adept. He is described as a condemned soul. The condemnation is both the official legal status, the charge that produced the prison stint in the lands between, and the metaphysical condition, the state of a soul that the Crucible's nature has altered beyond the ordinary boundaries of mortality. When a condemned soul attempts seppuku, the act that is designed to produce a clean and proper ending, the Crucible holds what it has bound. The ending does not come. The body that has merged with the armor, the soul that the Crucible has made its own, endures past the moment that should have resolved things. He performed the act. He survived it. He carries both. The act that was meant to end the guilt, and the guilt that the act did not end. Fact 89. The Undertaker was sent to the lands between by an abbess who expected her not to return. The Undertaker's departure from the monastery is described in terms that make the institutional intention clear. She was sent to slay the Night Lord. The assignment was not given to her because the abbess believed she was the right person for the task. It was given to her because the task was the kind that solved two problems at once. The Night Lord might be slain. This was the ostensible purpose. The Undertaker might not return. This was the secondary calculation, the one the law preserves without requiring the abbess to have stated it aloud. A woman whose hunger made the other members of the monastery uncomfortable, who needed to consume flesh and blood at regular intervals, who had once bitten her own arm when the refusal had gone on too long, was a problem the monastery had managed by assigning her the work of burying the dead. The lands between assignments was the next management strategy. The Undertaker arrived at the hold. She was alive. The abbess's secondary calculation had not produced its intended result. Fact 90. The Undertaker discovered that the night's residue could quiet her hunger. The hunger the Undertaker carries is not metaphorical. It is a constitutional condition. built into what she is, that requires flesh and blood at regular intervals, or the consequences arrive. She had been managing it at the monastery through access to the bodies she was assigned to bury. She managed it in the hold less visibly, in the dark corners, where the night's residue was available between expeditions. The residue of the night is not flesh and blood. It is not what the hunger requires. It is a poor substitute, unpleasant in the way that all substitutes are unpleasant when you know what is being substituted. But it quieted the hunger. The shakes did not come. The delirium did not build. The condition that had made her frightening to everyone who had ever known about it could be managed in the hold without the cost that managing it elsewhere had always carried. She consumed the residue in private. She was found. The scholar was the one who found her, and his response was not the response the monastery had given her. He did not expose her. He offered her a deal. Fact 91. The Undertaker's journal ends with a sentence. She had come to believe, not one she had always believed. The Undertaker's journal, which traces her arc from the monastery's assignment through the hold's expeditions and the scholar's intervention, ends at a specific point in her understanding of herself. The path to peace had been offered. The sacrifices would be worth it. For her, with little else but bloodshed to call a talent, perhaps she had found a purpose. The final sentence is, she had come to believe it now. The tense is specific. Not she believed it, not she had always known it. She had come to believe it. The coming is the arc. She arrived at the hold having been assigned to a task by people who hoped she would not survive it, carrying a condition that had made her an embarrassment to the institution that had shaped her, managing the hunger in the corners of a building full of people she had not told. The scholar found her. He kept her secret. He gave her something that might change the hunger's management without the cost. And she, who had arrived with nothing but the assignment and the hunger, came to believe that a purpose was possible. The believing was recent. It had not been there before the hold. The hold put it there. Sleep well. Tomorrow, the final part. The secrets, the Easter eggs, the Garbs that reference other games, the Forsaken Hollows DLC, and the 100 things this series set out to tell you, counted and completed. We have been through the world of Nightreign at the pace it deserves. The parallel timeline and the Night's Tide, and the 8 Night Lords, who are Hailstor's 7 expressions and his final form. The Roundtable hold, and the Iron Menial, and the Duchess, who had been there all along. The Wylder's dream that does not change, and his sister's name written as empty brackets. The Guardian's wing and the Recluse's charm that became a curse, and the cliffside where the accounting was done. The Raider's rival and the coastal waters. Particular understanding of what a worthy opponent is worth. The Revenant's doll name and the skull visible for a moment in her face. The ionized letters written to a custodian he called Guardian at the end. The executor's cry and the painting he has not finished. The Undertaker's belief that arrived late, but arrived. Tonight we finish with 9 facts about the things that sit alongside the lore. The Garbs, the architectural references, the confirmed connections to the broader From Software universe, and 1 mechanical detail that changes how an entire category of weapons works. 9 facts. The 100th one is the last. Fact 92. The From Software reference Garbs can only be purchased after defeating the final Night Lord. The most visually significant cosmetics in Nightreign, the Garbs that reference characters and armor sets from across From Software's catalogue, are locked behind a specific condition. Defeating Hailstor, not any Night Lord, the final one. The game places the references to its own history at the point of completion. available only to players who have seen the full arc of what the knight produced and ended it. They cost 7,500 merc each. The currency earned through expeditions, the dark name resource that the hold accumulates through the work, is what purchases them. A player who has completed the final fight and accumulated enough merc from the expeditions that led there can then dress in the visual language of games that came before. The condition creates a particular reading of what the Garbs are. They are not shortcuts or rewards for casual engagement. They are the thing waiting at the far end of the work, the acknowledgement that someone who has come this far belongs to the broader tradition those Garbs reference. You do not dress as Solaire on your first run. You dress as Solaire after you have learned what the knight requires. Fact 93. Solaire's armour appears in Nightreign as the Sunlight Knight garb for the Guardian. The Sunlight Knight garb for the Guardian is Solaire of Astora's armour from the original Dark Souls, which is among the most recognisable and most referenced designs in the From Software catalogue. Solaire is the knight who praises the sun, whose gesture became one of the first and most persistent community rituals of the Dark Souls series, whose armoured silhouette has been reproduced as merchandise and fan art and gestures in subsequent games across the company's history. The Guardian receives this garb, the Pinion Folk Knight from the Winged Realm, who lost his flock and found a new one, whose wing no longer opens, who learned from his teacher and confronted her on a cliffside and chose what to do with what he knew. He is the one who gets to wear the armour of the sun-praising knight. The connection between them, if one chooses to draw it, is the quality of protection expressed as loyalty to a group. Solaire wanted to find his own son, and stood by the players who fought alongside him toward that end. The Guardian's governing value is the flock, the group that flies or fights together, the people whose positions you adjust to cover as they adjust to cover yours. The garb does not give any mechanical benefits. It gives the Guardian the visual language of one of the series' most beloved characters. Whether that connection is intentional or incidental, From Software placed it on the Nightfarer, whose story is most built around the meaning of standing beside someone. Fact 94. The Iron Eyes Bloodborne-inspired garb connects the Fellowship's assassin to Yharnam's hunters. Iron Eyes reference garb is Bloodborne-inspired, drawing from the Hunter and Yharnam Hunter sets, or possibly a darker variant of Henrik's clothes. The exact source is not confirmed as precisely as Solaire's garb is confirmed, but the visual connection to Bloodborne's hunter aesthetic is clear enough that the community identified it immediately. The connection between the Iron Eye and Bloodborne's hunters is not only visual. Both operate in traditions of hunting. The Iron Eye as a Fellowship assassin trained to track and retire specific targets, the Bloodborne hunters as practitioners of the hunt against the beasts of Yharnam. Both are professional killers, whose professionalism is inseparable from what they are, for whom the work is the expression of the training, rather than just employment. The Bloodborne hunter garb in Nightreign is worn by a centipedal scion of the Fellowship, who, at the end of his arc, chose the knight. The hunter who wore that garb in Yharnam was hunting creatures the knight had produced. The correspondence between the garb and its wearer is From Software maintaining the kind of meaningful cross-referencing that the community has come to expect from the studio's work. Fact 95. The Duchess has a skin that references both patches and the black leather set across multiple games. The black leather garb for the Duchess resembles the armor worn by Patches across most of his From Software appearances. Patches, the recurring merchant and trickster who appears in Demon Souls, Dark Souls, Elden Ring, and other entries. wears a distinctive black leather set, whose silhouette is recognizable across the catalogue. The connection between the righteous thief and the series' most persistent thief character is legible at the level of the Garbs function in the lore. Patches steals. He manipulates. He appears in places he was not expected and removes things that were not his. The Duchess's title comes from her capacity for escape and theft. Her character description explicitly uses the word righteous in front of thief, which is the same kind of moral framing that makes Patches a beloved figure rather than a simple villain. The garb is also connected to the black leather set that appears in Demon Souls, Dark Souls 2, and Dark Souls 3 as basic thief equipment. The Duchess's reference points to the beginning of the tradition the series built around this particular visual category. The leather-clad figure who moves through dangerous spaces by the quality of their evasion, rather than the thickness of their armor. Fact 96. The Executor is the only Nightfarer with both a male and female variant of his Dark Souls reference garb. Among the From Software reference garbs, one Nightfarer receives unusual treatment. The Executor is described in the lore as gender ambiguous, despite using he/him pronouns in the game's materials, and his Dark Souls reference garb is the only one in the game to have both a male and a female variant. This is a design decision that acknowledges something the Executor's character lore preserves through the Two Faces philosophy. A crucible holds a composite. The Executor, more than any other Nightfarer, is a character whose identity is explicitly built around containing two things at once: the warrior and the painter, the crucible knight and the artist, the condemned soul who did not die. The provision of two gender variants for his reference garb extends the composite nature of his identity into the cosmetic system. The female variant is available alongside the male variant. Both cost 7,500 merc. Both require defeating Healstore to unlock. The player who chooses either is engaging with the same character, expressing the same arc through whichever presentation fits their engagement with him. Fact 97. The Roundtable Hold's central structure is a deliberate bonfire. Homage. The visual architecture of the Roundtable Hold contains a reference that players who have spent time with the Dark Souls trilogy recognized quickly. At the center of the hold, in the gathering space where the table and the fireplace and the iron menial and the various Nightfarers coexist, there is a structure that combines two familiar elements: massive weapons stuck into the ground, and a concentration of grace gathering at the center that creates the visual impression of flame. The weapons in the ground are the exact composition of the Dark Souls bonfire. The grace as flame is the Elden Ring aesthetic, applied to the same architectural idea. The Firelink Shrine in Dark Souls is the hub that serves the same function as the Roundtable Hold, the place between the fights, the space that organizes and receives, the location where the fire is kept. Game director Junya Ishizaki confirmed in interviews that the hold was inspired by Firelink Shrine. The visual reference in the hold's central structure makes the connection visible rather than only stated. Players who come from Dark Souls to Nightreign find the fire in a different form but in the same position, serving the same function, marking the same space as the place that is home. Fact 98. The game director confirmed Dark Souls enemies appear because of the Knight's influence. Before Nightreign's release, when players noticed familiar enemies in the trailers, From Software's game director Junya Ishizaki provided an explanation through an interview translated by Eurogamer. The Dark Souls enemies appearing in Limveld were there, he confirmed, thanks to the influence of the Night King. Their presence reinforces the sense of chaos the night produces. The phrasing in the official promotional text for this was, "In the night, ancestral foes await, remnants of a fire that once burned bright. The fires of Dark Souls are the fires of the Age of Fire, the civilization built around the first flame that the Dark Souls trilogy describes ending, and then being prolonged, and then ending again across 3 games. A fire that once burned bright. The Dark Souls enemies that appear in Nightreign are the remnants of that tradition, brought into the Elden Ring universe by the Knight's dimensional reach, ancient by the Knight's own account of them." The official statement makes the Dark Souls enemies not only a fan service element, but a lore element. They are there because the Knight brought them. The Knight has that power. What appeared in the trailers as a recognizable face from another game is, inside the fiction, a fragment of a lost age that the Knight has pulled into a new one. Fact 99. Bows in Nightreign have unlimited ammunition and can deliver critical hits. This is a mechanical fact that changes the role of an entire weapon category compared to its function in the original Elden Ring. In that game, bows required arrows, which were a finite resource requiring management. Critical hits with bows were not available. The range playstyle carried the cost of ammunition tracking and the limitation of not being able to access the critical hit system that melee weapons used. In Nightreign, bows have unlimited ammunition. They can deliver critical hits. They are compatible with weapon buffs and greases, which allows the range playstyle to access all the chemical and magical enhancement systems the game provides. The Iron Eyes character is built around this specifically. His description notes that he is much more proficient at using bows compared to the other Nightfarers, and that the unlimited ammunition and critical hit access alleviates a lot of the shortcomings of range combat. The design choice reflects the expedition structure. An expedition is 45 to 60 minutes in a world that cannot be paused for inventory management. The scarcity model of the original game, which asks players to manage resources across a much longer campaign, is not appropriate for a format where running out of arrows mid-fight has a different cost. The Knight does not pause. Ammunition that runs out in the middle of the third night does not wait for a merchant to restock it. Answam, Fact 100. The Forsaken Hollows DLC added 2 new Nightfarers and a new area to the Hold's work. On the 4th of December 2025, 6 months after Nightreign's release, the Forsaken Hollows DLC added Scholar and Undertaker to the Hold's roster and opened a new area within the Hold's operational geography. The DLC had been foreshadowed in the base game. Both Scholar and Undertaker are referenced before they are playable, their presence implied by the questlines of the original Nightfarers. The Scholar found the Undertaker in the Hold's dark corners. The Undertaker's arc is completed through the Scholar's intervention. The 2 characters were in the Hold's story before they were in the Hold's roster. The Great Hollow is the new shifting Earth location introduced in the DLC, adding a new landscape type to the expeditions and new encounters shaped around it. The DLC also introduced new Night Lord content through the Balancer, the boss encounter that Scholar and Undertaker's questlines converge toward. The Forsaken Hollows DLC did not close the whole story. The whole story is the Knight, and the Knight is Hailstor, and Hailstor was a man before he was a Night Lord, and what made him a Night Lord was a grief so complete that it cursed a world. The Hold was assembled to address this. The assembling took 10 Nightfarers, told over 8 parts, across 100 facts. This has been 100 unusual Nightreign facts to fall asleep to. From the parallel timeline and the Knight's violet fire, to the boarding house in Dusken Valley, and the sealed letter waiting in an assassin's effects, to the doll whose name was Greek for Laurel, to the painting that is not finished yet, to the man with no face beneath his helmet, and the woman in the white robe who already knew him. Told slowly, over 8 nights, for the quiet between waking and whatever waits in the dark. Good night, my dear friend.